All right, we've got a quorum and 6. You're good to go. I guess you probably still want to chair since you're in person, but you guys can sort that out.
Morgan, am I still chairing? Am I being the speaker or you?
No, you're leading the charge, please.
Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to the November 18th meeting of the Water and Sewer Commission. So first we will say welcome, and does anyone have a public comment? Seeing that we have so many spectators, I'm assuming no. Does anyone have any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Also no. So we will move right on to the approval of our last meeting's minutes. Our last meeting was on November 4th.
Madam Chairperson, I move we approve the minutes of November 4th.
Lisa, I'll second.
All right. So without hearing any further questions, can we take a vote to
Approve the minutes.
approve the minutes of the November 4th meeting?
J, I.
Lisa, I.
Bard, I will abstain.
Morgan will abstain.
And Aaron will say aye. So we will pass the minutes, approve the minutes from the last
Good.
meeting?
I have
Yes,
one
dear.
question. Do you guys get the minutes sent to you?
Yes.
Can I get on that list just so I have them? Cause I don't,
You're on my email distribution. I don't send them out to the commission or the board until the Friday before the next
Okay.
meeting. So when I copy you on the email to the commission usually that has the memo in the packet.
they're in there?
Morgan usually
There's-
puts them up on
there's
the town website.
There's a
They're
link
nice.
Okay.
there. If you want them earlier.
No, that's fine.
They're usually
No.
I think
highlighted.
You're usually, you're copied on my
blue.
Friday emails to the commission,
Yeah,
right? With the
no,
memo.
yeah, I
There's-
guess
there's-
I've never looked closely
Yeah,
at,
if you read through the text, which is
okay.
sort of the same every week, there's a link there every week.
I'm always looking at like the agenda and the,
Yep,
They're not an
they're not-
attachment, they're in the
Okay.
body.
They're in the
all
bottom.
right, I'll look them up. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So our next order of business, we have one purchase order to All Seasons Excavating. It is purchase number 4753 in the amount of $82,000 to repair the forced main below the bridge on Bridge Street from the flood, correct?
And if I recall correctly, we would have loved that to be lower, but they were basically had us over a barrel. Nobody else wanted to bid on it. Right?
The only better if we did a full
Yeah.
RFP process and everything.
I mean, it was a little more work than they did after the December flood. The December flood, it was in the 54 range.
Mhm.
But, you know,
I-
seeing it more and more
we had to
prices.
get it done. We couldn't wait.
Yeah,
until spring.
I didn't,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And the job was, I mean, they did a good job. There was some cosmetic things that I think they could have done better, but
Okay.
it's up, it's level. I mean, it looks good. The hangers are all back proper. The styrofoam is wrapped with tin, so the birds can't peck on it and stuff.
Did they beef up the hangers and all, Steve? You know,
There's
like-
not really much you can do
Yeah.
with the hangers. Yeah, I mean, hopefully we can engineer to move it and put it up higher where the water line is, but that's a project, you know, coming down.
It's warm weather work.
Well, and it's more of a project to
I
ver-
have I have a stupid question. I told somebody in a California city who I happen to know about our tree knocking out that pipe, and they said, "Don't you have a baffle upstream from it that would?" You know,
Like
it's
a
literally
net.
like
Yeah.
a pole across the river at that height to stop a tree from coming past it.
Oh, that's actually a really
Yeah.
interesting
It's
That's
like
gotta
a
be
bridge,
something-
you know, there's bridges around the world.
Yeah.
Where it says if you hit this pipe, you're gonna hit that bridge, and people will just drive right through anyway. But it's the same basic idea, a cheap pipe
there's, yeah,
over human height over the river, so somebody paddling isn't gonna hit it, but a tree would hit.
yeah. I don't know if that would, I mean, where do you put it in the river? I mean, that's like,
Well, we'd have to find some opportune place, probably pretty close, because if it doesn't do us a lot of good if we put it here and a tree falls here.
right.
Mhm.
I
So it'd
think
have to
we-
be fairly close to the bridge.
But
we
also,
of some
if
sort.
it is being flooded and it's just a pipe, the tree hits it, goes over or goes under.
Well,
And then
But
it's,
I think we need a net, I mean, restrain it.
Well, I
I mean, I agree. You would think that's a good idea. I think ultimately we need to redesign the crossing to protect the pipe better. And
Yeah. I just hate
obviously
having
the
to-
water line is tucked up tight, which I am glad we haven't had to deal with a problem with that. And I think if we can engineer to get the sewer line up next beside it,
Beside it.
it
Yeah, then the
would-
bridge is the thing stopping.
You
yeah.
know, if we put something like a skid plate under the bridge, a tree would hit it. No, seriously.
Well, I mean, there's that
So
option.
you don't rip the bottom out of the
Yeah.
fan. So a tree would submerge a little bit, go into the bridge and then pop up
Yeah.
on the side.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, ultimately, I think if we can get it tucked up, I mean, you're talking another, I mean, I don't even know how much that would cost to put like steel
Skid plates
Yeah.
every
but
5
by the
feet or
time,
something
yeah,
like
by the
that.
time you got that done,
Be a heck of a bridge.
you might just relocate it where it was
Mhm.
well protected
Right.
and be done with it.
Or just lower the river.
Can dredge, can dredge.
Oh, I know, just shut the
Madam
water off.
Chairperson, I move we approve purchase order 4753 in an amount of $82,000 for forced main sewer repair at the bridge on Bridge Street to be paid to All Seasons Excavating.
Bart, I'll second that.
All right. Any further questions on this topic? Obviously, there could be further discussion, but not more for today. So, calling for a vote,
Lisa, I.
Bart, I.
J.I.
Morgan, I.
Aaron, I. So purchase order 4753 in the amount of $82,000 passes this evening.
Madam
So-
Chairperson, I move we approve the various warrants as presented.
Okay,
I'll second that. Bless you.
so does anyone have any further questions or discussion about the warrants as presented? Hearing none,
Nothing, yeah, I looked over them, nothing
it looks pretty straightforward.
pretty straightforward. There's no large amounts, and the ones that are there are for reasonable purchases like 4776, which we approved at a prior meeting,
Mhm.
and 5132. So yeah, these are all
Good to
pretty
go.
straightforward.
Well, without hearing any further questions or discussion, can we take that to a vote?
Lisa, I.
Bart, I.
J.I.
Morgan, I.
Aaron, I. So the warrants will pass as presented. Do we need to do that one? Do we have to do the FEMA ones differently? Or can we do them all together?
Were there a few more words on this one?
Well, there are FEMA invoices for the,
Wait, are you on the right email?
no,
No, I
That's fine.
I don't think we had any FEMA ones. I think we just had the regular ones.
Okay.
And typically we just do all the warrants at once. Sometimes the select board will have like 5 warrants and we'll just approve them in one motion.
Okay.
And then answer questions on specific warrants if there
Right.
are.
I was gonna say, I didn't think there was.
No,
any
there's
fee-
not. She was on.
oh, I had the wrong one pulled up.
For last meetings. I was like, oh, what did I forget?
Unless something had come in and I didn't see
No,
it. but-
no, we're all on the same page now. So.
right. Great, so moving on, we're going to move on to our items for presentation and discussion. And our first item is the consideration of approval of a policy and the amendment of a current policy, which would limit each structure to only one town water meter.
So I will pull this up. So Bard, you missed the last meeting. We added the purpose statement. And then in that meeting, Gary Bresser asked a question about, well, what if a building is a duplex and the owner owns one side and a different owner owns the other side? So we thought that was a good question. And we added some language in there to address that. So really the meat of it is right in this section here. Let me see if we can zoom in. I know I can. So the first part starts out that each structure that's serviced by the Richmond Water Resources Department shall have only one town water meter per water service line. If the building owner seeks to have multiple town water meters, then a water service line for each town meter must be constructed at the building owner's expense from the water main to the building. Then this is the part we added in, is if a building has 2 or more owners, where each owner owns a physically separate portion of the building, then the building must have one town meter for each separate portion of the building, with each meter having its own water service line connected to the main. And I tried to phrase it carefully to make sure that it wasn't just like, Aaron and I own a building together we can still have one main. But if she owns one side and I own the other side, we need two mains. So if I don't pay, you're not shutting her off, you're just shutting.
Shut her off anyway. But another thing Gary brought up, and I apologize if you just said this and I was zoned out. If a person owns a duplex, he owns the whole thing free and clear. And then he sells half of it. That person then has to install a curb stop.
Right,
If,
and Gary,
if there is not one already
Yeah,
there.
if he's got one curb stop the whole building because he owns both sides, and then he sells the half of it. According to this language, they would have to dig up.
Yeah.
So don't do it in the middle of the winter.
That-
when-
that's also to protect yourself as the new owner, so that
Absolutely.
you're not getting shut off if the other owner doesn't
And-
pay. And to Gary's point too, if you're building a duplex, you might as well just put two lines in when you're already excavated, because
Figure
it's not
something
gonna
out.
cost you a ton
And
more.
I,
In legal terms, could the two owners have an agreement, signed agreement that they share the meter? And if that happens, they have a remedy written in the agreement?
Not according to this proposed language.
I know, yeah.
right.
I mean, this is safer, but somebody's. been
I will say I had a discussion with a customer here in town who has several other apartment building type places in, and he says that it is every town he's ever dealt with, it is one curb stop, one meter. He said there are some duplexes that he's bought that do have the two lines, but they were houses that couldn't really be sold separate, you know, it wasn't like they were built as a duplex or a condo type area. But he was totally understandable about 1 meter, one curb stop.
Yes.
It looks-
Save aggravation.
MLW.
It looks like Morgan has a question. Morgan, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
It's back.
There we go. My lips were moving, right? So it's more of a comment to what Gary has proposed or put forward in that, I mean, if you have a duplex and you have two owners, they're more like investors in a piece of property. Whereas if there was a duplex that were treated as townhouses, you'd have two separate deeds to that. So it's more of a, maybe a comment that may need to be, that this needs to be addressed at a future date, because it's, from a legal standpoint, it's sort of an odd situation, isn't it? When you use the term duplex as opposed to a building that's separated by sort of townhouse or condominium law. But yeah, I don't see how else you could address what we're doing other than you physically have two curb stops in there for the same property.
Pardon?
How does it work for the existing condominiums? The townhouse things up here?
They all have an individual meter and ooh, no,
I think they only have one for the whole place.
they have
Right.
one main.
It's
Uh,
not ideal.
I believe they have one main and one. They each have a meter, and I believe they only have one. Yeah, I think there's just the main shut off going up the hill.
So
Let me double check that though.
I think it's worth checking, because I suspect there was an era where people just, why put in all these extra lines? You put in one to serve the building, and then you started selling them off. So I shouldn't be surprised perhaps that there are some buildings like this today.
Yeah.
With different owners and one service line, 1 meter, one shut off.
So do we want to put something in here, grandfather and all existing?
Well, I think we already did that, didn't we?
Yeah, we do have a clause that says,
That
at the
last-
time that the policy is adopted, the commission is aware that there are existing structures with multiple meters. We didn't really address
That's not-
so that's sort of, this is addresses the way it was initially written. There are structures which have multiple town water meters located in an individual water service line. Those structures do not have to come into compliance with this policy, but maybe it's something worth adding to say, we also know there's structures that have multiple owners with only one town meter. They don't have to come into compliance with this policy, but going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of what we did with that clause.
Okay,
Yeah, cause each one of the, I know each one of the condos has a meter. And I'm pretty sure I have to go back and double check the plans. I think there is just one main to the whole complex.
And do we read all the individual meters?
Yes, we do.
Oh,
So this is an artifact of a previous time.
Yeah.
So.
And
this
that's-
is
There's,
right.
there's
there-
also a
that's the-
house, the third house on East Main is a triplex now. And in the basement, it's one curb stop comes into the basement. And there are 3 meters in the basement teed off.
How do you get access to those?
How do I get access to them?
Do they?
I have to contact the owner of the building
Mhm.
and get access in through the basement.
Hmm.
Of one of the, you have to go into one of the apartments. But
I have a question. Will we ever run into this duplex thing with commercial and residential?
Mhm.
Like,
good,
I think we could easily.
you know, I think of the spots up on Bridge Street that have like businesses on the bottom and the residential on the top.
Mhm.
Are those zones such that someone could ever like sell the apartments
I don't know.
I don't know. if
in the
it's
Duke?
something-
Cause I feel like that would be a question too.
Yeah.
Does that mean if something ever split that was commercial, split to 2 owners? You know, like that, I guess I was under the impression that like the block Washburns at one point owned that whole block and then they split it off. Like when they did that, I assume they had to,
Which block?
didn't they own like where Man and Machine and
Oh,
all
yeah,
that stuff is? Didn't
Yeah.
Washburns own all of it?
Yeah.
At one point?
I believe you're right.
So when they broke that up, like if they still did and they broke that up into sections, does that mean that they would have to put?
so their, Man and Machine has their own.
Yes, I'm very aware it was right above my head when I
Stone
worked
Cor-
there.
And Stone Corral upstairs
Yeah.
has their own, but. So they have 2 meters which are accessible for us in Man and Machine.
But I guess I just.
But there
wanna-
is just one shut off for that building.
Yeah,
So essentially, if Stone Corral stopped paying their bill.
Yeah.
We would have to gain access. And shut them off in Man
Inside
and
the
Machine.
building.
Otherwise, we would have to shut Man and Machine off. And to either complicate it, if you take Hillview, there's 3 businesses in there. You only have 1 meter for all 3 businesses. Their service line is connected to the dog grooming building out back. So when the dog grooming building had a water leak back a couple weeks ago on their service line, I had to shut,
everybody off.
well, yeah, I had to shut off Brian's building with the dog groomer. And I had to shut off Hillview and the 5 tenants that are in that building or whatever number are in. So that whole area is, yeah,
But like, so this thing that we're signing, how would this affect those businesses if those?
we're not
owners
telling
didn't
them,
sell?
we're not telling them to change. I had the discussion with Brian. Look, it would be really nice if you put in a new curb stop and a new service to your building and take off the T that is, and he agreed that he would try to do it in the spring. I mean, he thought that was a good idea. He thought it's the way it should have been to begin with. It shouldn't be one line servicing essentially 6 businesses.
Cause I just see someone building a duplex and in the beginning, like you're owning the whole thing and you're owning the whole building and renting one half and living in the other half, but then things change and you
Exactly.
decide to sell it.
Yeah.
So now you're saying that the person has to go in and put another curb stop in. So
So,
I guess I'm a
so,
little confused
so
how that is different for commercial.
because right up front, we are notifying them, look,
Cause it's new construction.
because it's new construction, we're telling them, look, if you ever think that you're going to split it, you should put in the 2 curb stops when it's under construction, because you're digging 1 ditch.
I feel like you should just say that's a regulation if you're building a
Well,
duplex,
that's-
because
That's
in
what
my
you guys
mind-
have to tell me.
I mean, if
I'm
I
just
was,
enforced,
I was
but I
building a
mean,
duplex, I'd be like, I'm never selling that thing. I'm always gonna, you know, like, but you never know, things change. I
Well-
could get hit by a bus and my kids could have to
Like-
sell it, like,
but like Gary says, he just puts them in. He's like, it doesn't cost me any more to dig the trench and put 2 curb stops in and 2 meters to the duplex when I start. But not everybody is Gary.
So to the point of future regulation, it seems to me this has to be in planning and zoning. Last I knew, all the building permits don't go through the Water Sewer Commission.
Mhm.
So if we're gonna enforce this, the only plausible way to enforce either new construction or subdivision, if I can use that term, of an existing building is through planning, zoning, town clerk. We're not seeing it. How would I know if somebody who owns a duplex sold off half of it?
Right.
And this is kind of something that I feel we should pursue, especially with all of the auxiliary dwelling,
Mhm.
possibilities that are cropping up where people are asking, if you have a big enough lot, you put in an auxiliary dwelling for rental. I'm not asking for that to be connected to I'm asking for it to have a separate curb stop.
Well, and Gary is a developer in town
Yeah.
essentially, so I'm sure he does think that way. But I could see someone, that is
Yeah,
duplexes a lot of times tend to come, people build them
Yeah.
thinking then they have half to rent. So I feel like he might be thinking that way, but the average Joe might not think that way if they were building a residence that was a duplex, not a.
so I do agree. I think that we need to talk to planning and zoning.
Yes, Bard.
So, I mean, there's a couple of duplexes near me and I think they're still owned by the same owner, both sides, but it doesn't mean that will be that way forever. They are easily they're
Right.
fully separate living units. Really where I was going is perhaps we can invite planning, zoning to one of our meetings and have this conversation. Is this a viable policy and can you help us enforce it? Specifically for new construction and subdividing existing buildings. And
Yeah.
what would that look like? How would we go about it? It's probably something in the zoning regulations that's cross-referenced from us.
I think that's a good idea.
And I don't think this is a bad document. I just don't think it's clear enough, maybe.
Well, I think this is what, the 4th time?
Yeah, something like that. So whatever, we'll take another stab at it.
Uh,
Oh, good.
it's just every time something else we think
I
of.
mean,
that-
presumably,
and
we would know if, if a owner sold a part and then said, oh, I need a separate water meter, then the superintendent would say, you can't have another water meter, you only have one line. And then we
No
sort
water.
of, that's how we would, without an official notification from planning and zoning, that's how we would know.
And de facto, we have grandfathered existing multiple lines off 1 meter, or
Right.
there's no master meter on some of these, right? It's house meters, so somewhere between the curb stop and the house meters.
Yeah.
There is a possibility at least of leak that we're leaking before it's counted in their line.
Right.
I mean, the service lines are, pretty good in this town. I mean, they show pretty quickly, like the one at Brian's. I mean, Heidi called me and it was pretty obvious. She's like, it's running across my parking lot. And it, one step up onto the grass and you knew right where the leak was.
Lucky them.
Huh?
Lucky them.
Yeah, not as easy as your leak. but-
So, and I guess my other question is we charge, even if there's only 1 meter to the duplex, we're still going to charge 2 fixed fees
Yeah,
because it is 2 sides. So it's not doing us any disservice billing wise until they split it.
Until somebody stops
Yeah.
paying is really
That's
the
the problem.
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
potential problem.
Yeah, and we might even need to ask, I mean, let's say Heidi sold off 3 of those fourplex that she has. I don't think that would have to go back through zoning. Like Linda would know as the town clerk, but I don't think zoning would care who owns it because there's no property changes. Like,
It's just a transaction.
yeah, so we might need to ask Linda, like, how would we get
Yeah.
alerted by that? So we can do a little digging. Set expectations. I don't know if I'll have that ready for the next meeting because we've got a week this week and a short week next week, but I'll
Well, if
do
we're
it.
gonna invite someone from planning and zoning, it might take a couple weeks too for them to get here.
Yeah, or, I mean, if they've got I'll see what I can do. I just know we've got sort of, it's gonna be a little bit short to get ready for the next meeting.
But it's also not building season,
Right.
presumably.
Right, we got some time to talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've talked
Yeah.
about this policy now for 4 or 5 times, so we can
It's
do
getting
it.
better every time. Just-
Well, it isn't interesting, you keep
Yeah.
unraveling a new, didn't think about that.
It's like pulling at a thread.
Let's
Yeah.
pull that thread, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
All right, so do we feel comfortable tabling this for now and moving on to the next?
we'll try it
Topic.
again.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, keep tabling.
So the next thing, kick that can down the line and we're gonna discuss the water service line letters that went out to the customers.
Haven't sent out,
They haven't gone out to the customers yet.
working on it.
They were due to go out on Friday, and that is one of the things that didn't get done Friday. And
Friday got interesting.
yes, and they did not go out today because we tabled the fact that maybe you guys would want me to add something into the comment on the letter. So the service line inventory that we did, there were 165 unknown service lines. Now, there's,
Unknown meaning what it's made out of, correct?
right,
Do you want to use
but
the diagram?
so a service line starts, so a service line starts at the water main and goes to the curb stop. And then there is a curb stop line from there to the house. That whole thing is called a service line.
Mhm.
We have knowledge of all the service lines from the curb stop to the house, because we've either visually inspected them in the house or we have documentation when the lines were upgraded, what material was used. The problem being, there was a large number of them, 165, that we have no knowledge of what the material is because there was no records kept when the service lines were put in from the main to the curb stop.
I have my own question. Do you know the approximate window of years that those were put in, or was it over like a 30-year period, or was it like all one road
No,
that
it
was put in
is
at the
in
same
general.
time?
We don't have documentation where the engineers that did the study for us could say without a doubt, there's not a lead it's called a pigtail. A lead pigtail still in there from the main to the problem is, like I said, 95% of the service lines in Richmond are copper from the curb stop to the house. I am relatively sure that they went all the way to the new water line that was installed at that time. But because it did not say it in the documents,
You don't know for sure.
We don't know
we
for sure.
do not know for sure. So therefore, this letter needs to go out to the 165 people stating there is the possibility that it could be a lead service line.
Bart, did you still have something, or did he?
I thought it might be worth reminding people when the first service lines were installed in Richmond, when the first water line came down off the reservoir, up the hill, the tank.
Okay, those so the original lines have all been done away with except for Tilden.
Yeah.
And across, the Huntington Road section that we're looking to, those,
Tilden's supposed to be upgraded soon.
Well, I have
Yeah.
a follow-up question. So, but what is the vintage of that? Do you know?
That's what I was
of
asking.
the Tilden line,
For.
I don't know what the vintage is, but they came through at some point and upgraded all of the service lines on Tilden, because your service line is copper as along with some of the others on Tilden. actually the Huntington Road section, there and Railroad Street, we still have two galvanized service lines in place. And those get a different letter. Because we can't say without a doubt that there's not a lead pigtail still in place, which would have been common when galvanized was being used.
So-
And galvanized absorbs the lead. So
As,
if there's
yeah,
no lead
so,
left-
so essentially, if you have a lead pigtail, which is that section from the main to the curb stop, and then they used galvanized after that, essentially, the EPA tells us that that galvanized pipe is the same as a lead pipe now, because of the years of water, the lead deposits itself into the galvanized pipe. So there are two services in town, one on Railroad Street and one on, over on, across from Stone Corral, that are galvanized, and their letters are different. We have to tell them that, you know, look, both of those places are, so we do lead and copper every 3 years, and our numbers are wicked low. And both of those places with the galvanized lines are on the designated places to test. And they're within, I'm sure they were galvanized all the way back to the main. I don't believe there are any lead services, because our lead testing every 3 years is really low. I mean, we just did it this year and our numbers were still really low.
So the other thing that we know is when these water lines are replaced, like on Tilden, you pull it up, you're gonna be looking at what's there. So beyond just sort of the.
Well,
spit
there will
or-
be a new main.
Yeah.
And there will be a new pigtail to your curb stop.
Right,
The thing that I am looking for going forward is to document that so we can get rid of these unknowns.
So two questions. The people, like say Bard's getting a letter that he is in the question mark zone, but you're also planning to redo his line, I believe this summer.
We're not,
Or
we're not redoing his service line,
but his,
but the
the
section
the
from,
section that's in question. So do we add something in this letter to those places that,
if you want to, we can. What I've done is what the state would like.
right?
I've included my number, and people can contact me with an email, and I'll answer their questions.
Okay.
Right now, there is no monies out there, for actual digging and replacing lines. I mean, there are places in Vermont that have lead pigtails still. And what is gonna happen is that the EPA is hopefully gonna have money where there will be a program to replace those. And then, you know, what their hope is, eventually everybody's service line inventory will be clear from lead, without a doubt. But right now, because we don't have documentation where we can look in a paper and say, okay, the contractor agreed to replace from the main to the curb stops using copper, and from the house to the curb stop with copper. Because we don't have that documentation, we cannot say without digging them up 100% that you have not got a lead service.
And part of
Okay.
the guidance from the state was when you do dig them up for a project like we're gonna do at
Yes.
some point, you inspect, and if they're lead, replace, and.
Yeah.
So hopefully that project gets approved by DWSF
So,
soon.
so
So
I'm
do
hoping
we need-
I'm hoping that after we do the Tilden, the Cochrane Road and the Huntington Road project, that about 80% of those 165 will go away,
Be resolved.
will be resolved.
So do we need to do you need us to say great to the letter or we? ready to
Yeah,
move
I
on?
mean,
Like,
I
mean, think it's
basically,
pretty-
there's a
well
section at the
explained.
bottom of it where there's other information. And we decided that we would ask if you guys want us to include any other information, or if you're good with it, we'll send them out.
Letter is pretty straightforward and it has Steve's contact information 3 times for
Yeah.
questions.
So your point earlier, you were talking about the pigtails where we're replacing the lines. We could insert something. These lines are due for replacement when we replace Tilden Avenue and wherever. We will replace any outdated lead pigtails.
Well, I don't want to say lead because
Okay.
I don't really think we have any,
Or you could say they'll be inspected.
but all of the,
Affected.
but all of the pigtails, when the construction will be, they will be documented
Inspected.
and going forward, we will know 100%.
But if they're in bad shape, they'd be replaced anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they'll be inspected and replaced as necessary, maybe?
Yeah.
That sounds-
Can I redo the infographic for you so people can read what the words say?
Sure.
I can do it quite quickly if you'd like me
This
to.
graphic here,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be better when is it better when
it just
prints?
looks like it's been photocopied like 50 times and you can't
Mm.
see what it says.
Yeah.
Slightly.
If there's a way to, I mean, these are form letters. We don't have the original word on them, I don't think.
No, I didn't bring them. I do have the
Are they in-
copies
Are
that,
they in Acrobat?
yeah. This is right off of the,
It's the state
this
website.
information is,
Okay, well, if that's in Acrobat, I can convert that to Word and then she can put in a better infographic.
Yeah, it's PDF, right? It says
Yeah.
on top.
it's,
Yeah.
I think we can.
it's a PDF that the state sent to me.
Yeah,
To
it would
use.
take me 2 seconds to convert
Okay.
that to an editable Word
I
document.
mean, I think it, well, yeah, sure. If you guys want to mess around
Okay,
with it,
yeah.
I'll let you guys go
Great.
for it.
I'll email you
And then we'll add a line that
after the
says
meeting.
pigtails or something along those lines will be inspected whenever water lines are excavated for work. Or something for work on the water line.
And replaced if necessary.
Yeah.
Conditions warrant, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
cool. So I don't
if we had better construction documents, this would have gone away.
I wish
mean,
we could say this was shocking news, but
Huh?
I wish we could say this was shocking news, but
My
understand.
Just- like it.
concern with this is a lot of people getting upset that because it says lead in them, that they're gonna be like, what? We've got lead in our water, and that's not it here. I
I
mean,
will
we
say-
have years and years of testing for lead and copper, and we are way below the limits that they allow.
And if people have children on, the pediatrician makes you test
Yeah,
your water for lead when they're babies, so. Like I knew our water was fine. I mean, I guess it could be different now, but we
Shouldn't
tested
be.
it twice when we had little babies, so I feel like there is some lead testing that happens.
Here's the other thing we should all remember about lead. That if you live in a house that had paint applied before like 1977, something like that.
I think it's 80. Well,
The same
for
age. as
for
me.
us, it was 86, for the 86 is what they said.
So lead paint is sort of different,
Yeah.
but anyway, the assumption is you have lead unless you've proven that you don't have lead. So
Yeah.
there are older houses all around Vermont where you have to assume there's lead there just based on their age.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Until you've substantially inspected everything.
Yeah.
And proven that you don't have it. So this seems similar, like you.
Right. What this service line inventory was supposed to do is give them a database to start with and see how much is out there. And then they're gonna start picking, the way it was explained to me was the first thing you'll have to reduce your number by 10% every year. So and what they were looking at is places that still had lead pigtails in place. And they're gonna say, look, you need to reduce that by 10% every year until they're gone. I'm looking just to make sure we got the documentation to reduce our number of unknowns. and not be under the assumption.
All right, so, thank you. Looks good. Let's go on to item C. Update on the installation of water meters.
It's progressing, not as quickly as we did the first quarter that we did them. We're trying to get there. It's just been one thing after another keeps popping up. We did 4 today, but that's a good day. We're not, I don't know how many more we have scheduled for the rest of this week, but, we were doing 5 and 6 a day on a regular basis. The first quarter, we haven't been able to get to that stride right now. I'm not making excuses, we try. It's just something pops up and takes precedent. We haven't canceled any meter appointments, but we just haven't been able to keep schedule on them as much as we can. But we're trying. I mean,
Right,
And you had said that
thank
as
you.
the summer wraps up and you get to winter, it slows down, so you might.
yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that like January, we can knock them out of the park.
Yeah.
So it's
but,
good.
Everybody's
This
running around right
October, November and December has been a struggle for us. But like I said, I think Brad told me we're over 150 right now, out of the 340. So,
Nice.
I mean, we're getting there.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have liked to done another 100 for this quarter. I still am hopeful that we'll get there, but
Now, is that something Aaron and I can help with? I mean,
Yeah.
we'll just go out and,
Slap. I'm actually pretty good at water line things, so I could help. All right, so let's go on to the superintendent's report.
sure.
Okay.
Um. PLC for the septic receiving unit is also, has been an issue. We have to manually run the machine when a septic truck, so somebody literally has to be there all day for when septic trucks pull in. The PLC, Dan Pratt called me. He will be done with it. He approximated Friday, he told me he would be done with it in about 10 days and be ready to install it. And then we'll have to run it. Basically, he had to rebuild the program from scratch. So, once we put it in, we'll verify that it's working and everything. And hopefully that will rectify that. The influent pump, we had a meeting with Holt Tanner, and what we came up with was a couple of things. We're not gonna put it out to bid for installation. We're gonna handle the demo and installation of the new one ourselves. That was not my choice. My team wants to do it. They feel comfortable in doing it. And I think if we can handle it ourselves, basically the Phil Laramie pump, Brad and I did all the demo and 80% of the installation of that one. So we feel confident with the other 2 hires that we'll be right on track and be able to do it. That being said, the influent pumps that Holt Tanner had chosen, I have a big question about. They are, the brand is Flight. Flight is based, I believe, in Sweden. And we have other Flight products that we have. The mixers in our anoxic zone are Flight. And we have waited up to 10 weeks for parts and pieces or replacements from them because they have to come from Sweden. I have a big question of waiting 10 weeks for parts and pieces for a pump that is as important as an influent pump. even the electric motors are proprietary to Flight. You can't go to a motor store and buy an off the shelf motor. You have to get the one that's designed for their pump.
C-faced motors?
Huh?
They're C-faced, they bolt right on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I really have a big question, and I have asked her to go back to the drawing boards and come up with a couple other options where the pumps are more off the shelf accessible parts, where we don't have to be proprietary to one company for everything.
Can we
Are-
get any Saab auto parts?
Yeah.
Or is there something where one of us could just go to Sweden and pick them up?
Okay, I'll go.
Well, I mean, that is my feeling. I really feel when you are that proprietary to, you can't get a motor off the shelf somewhere in Burlington, or because it's gotta be their motor, the way it mounts, the way it works. I just have questions, and she admitted that we're not the only, she likes these particular pumps, and uses them in a lot of places. And she is hearing more and more questions about getting parts, getting
So
pieces.
there's other users around.
Yeah, that are questioning this. And she had no problem going back to the drawing board and coming up. And I asked her to come up with 3 options. More, the ones that we have now, we could order an electric motor from a motor company and it would fit.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, they're ANSI
and we could have it, within reason, a couple, even 2 weeks is probably at most for what we would need, but being beholden to the company just because it's that particular, I had a question. So she has gone back to the drawing boards to come up with 3 pumps, all options not of Flight design. I will admit the Flight design is nice, the way it wears, the way it takes stuff in. But you're weighing the options of, I'm looking at a pump that, our last pumps were 1972. I would like you guys to be able to get 20 years out of these pumps without having to replace them, but I'm not also looking for a breakdown where we're waiting,
Mhm.
eight, we originally were told 6 weeks when I ordered the mixers, and, they told us 6 weeks. The first one was 8 weeks. The second mixer, they told us was 6 weeks, came in at 10 weeks. So I have a problem with that type of, and I brought it up to the dealer, the rep that came through, and he didn't give me a satisfactory answer to solving the problem. Or a guarantee of, yeah, we can get them for you when you need them. We'll have them on the shelf. The answer was,
They're not-
that's the way we have
they're
to
not
do
willing to
business.
participate.
Yeah.
Morgan, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks, Aaron. It does seem strange that they don't have an office or rep in the country that has an inventory of parts to.
They
that
do
break down.
have a rep in the country. He's out of Massachusetts, but they do not keep, they don't keep parts and pieces in-house.
Expensive.
Yeah, and like I said, when I ordered the mixer, they told me, 6 weeks, we'll have it to you. And I'm like, well, okay, we were just coming out of COVID when that was ordered. But the second one, 6 weeks, we'll have it. And I said, well, it took 8 weeks, and it took 10 weeks for the second one. And that was, in 2023. So,
And the next hurdle for us may be tariffs under the next administration.
oh, you don't, yeah, there is that. So,
Double, so, yeah.
So I've asked her to go back to the drawing board and come up with 3 pumps that we could look at and discuss. And I mean, unless you guys tell me, go order the flight ones. But I'm just looking at from our perspective of being able to get parts and pieces. Something that I can go to call Burlington area and get a motor and have to replace it.
So hopefully to include at least one made within the continental United States.
Exactly, exactly. Steve, what would it take to adapt some other brand in your system?
Since this is a whole retrofit, ultimately, it isn't.
Okay.
We do not, the pumps that we have now, in place, are not produced anymore.
Mhm.
So we're essentially
Okay, so you gotta-
retrofitting. I mean, it's,
For anything.
yeah, it's a complete clean slate.
Good.
She has a design for a 3 pump system. And placement of this, replacing the influent pump that really doesn't work now,
Mhm.
is the first piece in the 3 pump system going in. So,
Oh,
yeah,
Any of the big.
I'm-
brands,
I'm-
course,
I am, what I'm looking for is a pump that's reliable.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make the calls to other people that have them and see how they feel, parts and pieces. That's what I do. I mean, I call, I get people that have them, and I'm gonna call and I'm gonna ask, what do you think? What do you like? What's the problems? And try to pick one that's good, one that is workable for us. I will say that the pump that we got from Phil, to clean that pump out when it plugs with rags is a 10-minute process. To clean the old style pump that we had is an hour process because of the access and the ability to clean it is easier. So those things are really important that I feel looking going forward.
Yeah,
So I'm taking all that in consideration. It's a long,
once in a great while opportunity to do things. that
correct,
work for
and
you.
I'm not looking just to put it in because that's what the engineers likes to use, or it's a fancy, um, I'm looking for one that's dependable and,
It's got spares.
Gettable.
Spare
yeah,
parts,
I mean,
pipeline and all that.
Yeah.
We've
yeah,
got about,
Well,
everything
yeah.
about it.
we've got about limited minutes left.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
I think,
Yep,
I think
yeah.
we know why we're not going with flight.
Yeah. I wonder how to pronounce that word.
I will say that the clarifier is not done. I was hoping to have it put back together last week. We have to epoxy in some bolts. I got with a structural engineer from Holt Tanner. We got the right design epoxy and stuff for the project. We just have to take 10 minutes and get down in there and epoxy the bolts in to get that bracket back on the side of the concrete wall. Where hopefully it's on the schedule tomorrow. Was on the schedule today, but obviously didn't get done today. Aeration tank, is all cleaned and it's getting ready to fill back up for winter. Before we fill it up fully for winter, we're gonna fill it over the, aerators. And we're gonna actually see how many of the aerators are not working, after 10 years of service. We know that there is probably, I think there's more like 15, Brad thinks there's 10, that we know are not working. So, we'll take that into account. We'll get some parts and pieces over the winter. When we drain it down next spring before we switch, we will, replace all the aerators and parts and pieces in it.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything you want to add for next week's meeting?
No, we're still monitoring our, TKN, which is, ammonia. The nitrogen that we discharge into the Winooski has been a little high. We're not, I spoke of it last week, or we're not, there is no set limit for us. That is coming down the pike in a couple of years. We were a little high, but we're only required to monitor it every quarter. So we've gone to twice a month monitoring and we're checking to see what problems might have occurred. The alkalinity in our aeration tank affects the nitrogen fixing bacteria greatly. So the switch over to the second tank and doing some work in headworks maybe upset the bacteria. And we're looking at what we can do to get them back, to get our number back down.
So
But
do you have that on the list for next time?
Sure, Ammonia.
And
we're monitoring it monthly, bi-monthly right now. We're not required. The state hasn't said, oh, you're high or anything, but we're taking a proactive reaction to what we found in our monthly testing.
Great. And is there anything else anyone wants to chat about next time?
The big water and sewer dance party.
We have the policy on there, right? Is there any reason to talk about the tank? Have we heard?
I
back
have
from
not
the-
heard back from him or,
Okay.
Yeah, let's reach out and ask if.
Yeah,
where he's at.
yeah, we
find
can.
out.
Cause he was willing to come in and give you guys a rundown
Yeah.
once he had his report written.
And I guess Aaron and Morgan, should have emailed you guys. We do have a staff appreciation get together on Wednesday thank you for the flood response. And I forgot to email you guys last week. So if you have time to come by, it's Wednesday at Stone Corral from 3 to 5.
Do you know where that is?
Oh, Stone
know-
Corral.
Do you know where that is?
I do. I'll just walk.
Walking
on.
distance.
Walking.
Yes.
Okay, well, so,
I'll try to remind you guys when you email tomorrow.
okay, if anyone does, I guess, since no one has any other things, does anyone want to move to adjourn?
No, I think we should just keep going.
Yeah, we'll just segue into. Yeah, no,
I move we adjourn.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second. All right, so with no further comments, questions, taking that to a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Lisa?
Morgan,
Aye, Morgan, aye.
Aaron, I. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time at today's
So.
water and sewer meeting.